Well, joining us to discuss the calls for Nigeria to hire mercenaries in the Boko Haram fight, former force commander of the African Union Intervention Force in Sudan, Anthony Atolagbe, and Kabiru Adamu, who is the managing director of Beacon Consulting Limited, a renowned firm providing enterprise risk and security management solutions. Let's start with you, Kabir. Good to see you again. And you've heard the Chief of Defense Staff give reasons why Nigeria cannot toe that line. Tell us what you know concerning, first, using external forces, which we, in this case, call mercenaries, to prosecute the fight against terror.
Thank you, Suleiman. Private military contractors or mercenaries, a reality. They do play a role in different theaters of conflict. However, what is significant is for that role to be defined. And that definition is usually done at the strategic level, where a country, for instance, determines that it has gaps in its national security arrangement, and that gap can either best be filled by a public security arrangement or a private security arrangement. In the cases that we've seen across the world where we've seen successes, the usage are usually with their nationalities. So the private military contractors that they usually contract, in the case of America, the owners of those PMCs, private military contractors, are usually Americans who are driven most times by patriotic desires and then oftentimes by their profit motive. However, in Africa, most of the times where I think the mistake or the challenge comes in is that these PMCs, private military contractors, or mercenaries as the case may be, are foreigners. And because as in the African continent, most countries do not have the capacity to determine the interest of these private military contractors, the point made by the Chief of Defense Staff is a valid point. We saw in the case of when Nigeria contracted a private military contractor during the Jonathan era, we saw what happened. Successes were achieved, but then unfortunately, because the successes were not driven by a strategic objective, I think the rest of it is history. In the case of Mali, Burkina Faso, and to an extent Niger, that we're seeing Russian private military contractors, Wagner, being involved. The same challenge. They are Russians. The strategic objective is not clear, and so the likelihood of the interest of that particular private military contractor being at, not in tandem with the interest of those countries is extremely high. So these are some of the challenges of using private military contractors. In Nigeria, I do not think we've determined at that strategic level whether we need or we don't need. But then the Chief of Defense Staff have provided his opinion, his perspective of that. I think there will be other components of the Nigerian security system that perhaps will have their opinion on that. But for now, we do not have any private military contractors. We do have private players, I must say this, who have the capacity to support the Nigerian, both armed forces and other components of the security sector. With force multipliers, the Chief of Defense Staff mentioned technology. There are private players that can come in as private military contractors to support in that regard. So I think it's all about determining in a strategic way what private support is required, and then, of course, using the various mechanisms to ensure that the interest is one that supports Nigeria's national strategic objectives and not necessarily an interest that is at counter purposes with the Nigerian strategic objective.
All right, let me bring in retired General Anthony Atolagbe here. Do you agree that what is missing when it comes to the idea of toying with mercenaries or private security outfits is that objective, a clear-cut objective as to the use of them? Or do you agree with the CDS when he says, look, Nigeria does not need mercenaries. What we need, the funds that would be deployed, in getting the services of mercenaries should be, plowed into equipping the military and providing everything that's required for the Nigerian military to, successfully prosecute the war against terrorism. Do you agree?
Okay, good evening, viewers. Kabiru has actually covered some bits of what actually should be said concerning the employment of PMCs. What actually is the case with West Africa, Nigeria, is not also the case with those that are using them, like the Blackwater of the US that has been engaged in operations in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on. So I will want to say that there are instruments on the ground. It's just that we are not exploiting the instruments enough. And I'll give you examples. Right. So, in West Africa, we have what we call ECOWAS Standby Force. The ECOWAS Standby Force is divided into two commands. On the Western Command, we have Senegal that takes the lead. In the Eastern Command, we have Nigeria. What we have in the Multinational Joint Task Force is almost a replica of what the command should look like. And apart from Cameroon, which is not a West African nation, the rest of them that are taking part in the operation mostly are from West Africa. So what we needed to have replicated is to have a Western command, which will now factor in the threats that are within the Sahel region, and then be able to deploy accordingly along with the troops of those other countries that are on that side. And that is what we are doing here in the Multinational Joint Task Force, still in cooperation with the theater command that is even in Nigeria. So notwithstanding that the various countries will have their own theater commanders, then the ECOWAS Standby Force deploying the Western Command will now take charge and be in support of all those forces that are raised. So to me, when we have this kind of command, what happens? We are able to pool resources together. So you now see, take for instance, Chad. When we deployed to Mali, Chad came with 236 tanks. So imagine if Chad should just roll in tanks into the operation that is going on in Difa. Then let's look at the level of the capacity of the forces that are on the Western Command. When we talk about Air Force, after Nigeria, Senegal is the next. They are combat ready and they are very effective. When we did the intervention in the Gambia, they were the ones who were controlling the air. And that made the president to vacate office immediately when he saw the level of air superiority that was working in the airspace. So I think if we put as I know, the ECOWAS currently is working on this other command. And
right.
Yeah, so if they are able to bring them up, then with the cooperation of these other Sahelian states that are under the military government, then I think we should be able to forge ahead and make a headway.
Well, listening to General Atolagbe, I think that's some kind of sudden news or update there. But Kabir, there's another sore point which the CDS pointed out earlier, and it has to do with the people. Reminding us of one bad example of how the people, we had almost taken sides with the bad guys, asking them to come attack the APC of the Nigerian troop. Now, help us make sense of what could be going in the minds of the people to have such support for people that they should be telling on to the authorities instead of giving some kind of information.
It's a very complex situation, and I had to train my ear very well to make sure I heard correctly what the CDS said. When you want to bring people close to you, you have to be also mindful how you put across some messages. I'm sure perhaps the CDS will have more to say about that circumstance. Maybe it's one instance in several other instances. Having said that, in terrorism and situations of banditry of the type that we're experiencing in Nigeria, one word that is extremely important for especially the coordinators of our national security approaches to take into cognizance its influence. Both sides, the side of the government and the bad side, are actually fighting over influence. And the party that is able to sustain that influence is the party that will win the war eventually, especially in an asymmetric warfare. In this regard, what allows that particular group, if it's government, to exercise influence, what allows the other bad side to exercise influence is their ability to influence the outcome of any instance. So if the people believe that they'll be protected from harm, they are likely to side with whichever side protects them. So in the case of the banditry circumstance, we are working to a situation where bandits determine how people can go to their farms, determine their livelihoods, and then even sometimes determine certain outcomes, mining as an example. So in that circumstance, the people sometimes have to choose between speaking to either the government side that in most instances don't protect them enough, or in certain instances siding with the bandits. So it's not a simple decision, but I think what is significant is for the security agencies to improve protection, especially public protection, provide the means for the people to share information with them. The integrity of that information has to be important. In the past, we've seen instances where when that information is shared, the same people are now attacked and killed. In fact, I've documented that enough, and I'm sure you've also documented it. So it's not as easy as that. There are certain components that would have to be provided. When you tell people, see something, say something, have you provided the platform? Have you provided the means for people to say that something in a manner that is protected? Or are you just saying that for the sake of saying today? We don't have a single unified system that if I'm in distress, I'm going to call. We have several, disparate ones. We have the 199, we have the 122, and then almost every organization has this 10 or 11-digit number that you can speak on. So these are the little nitty-gritty issues that would have to be protected. Also added to that is the inability of the federal and the state governments to come to an agreement regarding the either anti-banditry or counter-terrorism approach that they would follow. In the case of Zamfara State, the state governor is saying no negotiation, and then he's alleging that someone in the federal government is negotiating. So these are the kind of things that are affecting the people. And like I started in my conversation, it's very important for especially the government side to appreciate the significance that influence plays in both the anti-banditry and the counter-terrorism approach.
General Atolagbe, one point raised by former head of state Abdulsalam Abubakar that one of the undercurrents of poverty and unemployment, and of course the proliferation of small arms along the Sahel region is feeding into this terrorism in the ECOWAS or even Sahel region. Now, when you factor this in, on the issue of whether the communities are supportive of the terrorists and what have you, how do you gain the confidence of the communities in a way that they will cooperate with state actors, with the government forces, to provide information and whatever is needed or required to ensure that banditry and terrorism is pushed back?
Thank you for your question. This was one of the issues that was addressed. And we brought it to the fore that what we have seen on the field is that we have, for instance, in Nigeria, what Boko Haram does is different from what ISWAP does. ISWAP runs a kind of proto-nation kind of arrangements with the communities where they are. They establish local authority. They establish administration of justice. They make it possible for people to go to farms so that they can pay their dues and taxes. So, and so on. So unlike what Boko Haram does, they take everything by force. And this is just the example of a kind of an arrangement that the government, both the federal, state, and local government, we need to key into. How do you do this? Within the military, we have what we call winning hearts and minds. It's a structure that is on the ground for every commander taking troops to any theater to make sure that you are able to control the environment, not by any form of force, but warming yourself into the hearts of the people. So they build schools. If there are bridges that are bad, you bring engineers, they come and fix them for you. And then we have civil-military coordination, which is also another department under the UN that is saddled with the aspect of taking care of some of these things. So now what happens is that the moment you are able to dislodge these adversaries from the conflict environment, it should be part of the concept or the kind of plan that you have laid down on the ground, that the moment they are disengaging, you are soothing the pains of the people. You are making sure that everything is getting organized. Children, if it's possible, within the shortest possible time, are able to start going to school. And then if people, in fact, what we did in Kidal, in northern Mali, was that the moment the Operation Saval of France, when they cleared the adversaries from that location, they pulled in the MINUSMA or team. So as soon as we moved in, the first thing that was done was to install the local government chairman within the area. And then the governor also came in. And then we started allowing some dissipation, breaking down of some of their structures to make sure that what we are supposed to be doing now start gaining ground so that people can support us. And then that was able to, so we, today I put it to the CDS that, yes, I know we are doing this hearts and mind, but we need to do it in such a way that it must surpass what the ISWAP and the other adversaries are doing.
We're closing, and I hope, Kabiru, you can do us the honor of wrapping this in 60 seconds. The president spoke on October 1, and we've seen the scorecard. In the light of what Bekin has been doing, how far are we gone in getting the bandits leaders out of our communities?
Well, the president mentioned that about 300 bandit commanders and terrorist commanders have been killed. Now, part of the challenge is this. We have a sanctions list that maintains the list of terrorists in the country, and that's the only authoritative document that says who is a terrorist in this country. So far, we haven't been shown the number of the terrorists that have been killed from that sanctions list. Then the Defense Headquarters has also published names of bandits, and we've not been shown how many names on that published list has been killed. So these are some of the challenges that I think the current government would need to align with. When such leaders, when such statements are made, and then people in the locations where banditry and terrorism are going on cannot relate such claims to their day-to-day livelihoods, then unfortunately there is a gap. And I thought that gap needs to be closed. Let the successes be translated to real-day existence of the people. Let people have access to their farms. Let people be able to travel. Let Turji not be able to demand levies from communities. Let the killings be reduced. And then people would now, of course, key in and believe what the government is saying.
Right. Thank you so much. Well, it must be stated the president has actually warned terrorists. He says, look, hand yourselves over to government forces. Otherwise, you'll face the ultimate results, which will be death. All right, we'll have... Okay, General, maybe you should even respond to that. I mean, the president warning terrorists to, give themselves up to government forces or face the ultimate, results. Your thoughts on this? President is saying enough is enough with these terrorists. They've been around 15 years. Very quickly, General.
Okay, from me, as the Commander-in-Chief, that is a marching order to the armed forces to do what is needful to ensure that the space is cleared for the relative security for people to carry on their lives, livelihood. And it's only, I know when you give such orders, you are also in a position to listen to your commanders on the ground as to their requirements, to make sure that you provide those necessary things that will make them to accomplish those instructions that you have given. And I think the president is in a very good position to achieving that.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. General Anthony Atolagbe, former force commander, African Union Intervention Force in Sudan, and of course, Kabiru Adamu.